have Senator Michael Bennet.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Michael Bennet from Colorado. My family is with me today, Susan and Caroline, Helena and Ann. This is where we're spending our vacation, the Iowa State Fair. Thank you for having us. I want to say a few words by way of introduction, and I'm happy to open it up for any comments or questions or criticisms anybody has on any topic. Before I was in the Senate, I hadn't really been in politics. I was the school superintendent of the Denver Public Schools, a large urban school district in America where most of the kids live in poverty. And what I learned about the kids there was that they have exactly the same dreams that I had as a kid. Their parents have exactly the same dreams for them that my parents had for me, and that Susan and I have for our 3 daughters. And they face enormous challenges, like school kids all over this country, when they're living at a time when we've got the worst income inequality that we've had in 100 years, and an education system that's reinforcing that income inequality rather than liberating people from it. And there's a reason for that, which is the best predictor of the quality of your education is the amount of money that your parents make. And I think that's deeply unfair in a country where we describe ourselves as the land of opportunity, as we should, and that's why I'm running for president. We need to fix that again in the United States. It's my view that the divisive politics that Donald Trump pursued to get elected and that he is now pursuing to stay in the White House is not going to serve the kids that I used to work for in the Denver Public Schools. And it's not going to serve their families well either. And that's true for kids all over America, in rural school districts, in urban school districts, who just want this country to work for them, who just want this country to work for their families, and who believe that if they go to school and work hard, that we will do the work we're supposed to do for them. They have to learn math. They have to learn their language arts. They don't have time to fix their own schools, or fix our immigration system, or deal with climate change, or make sure that we've got an economy that works for everybody in this country once again when it grows. They have a reasonable expectation that other generations of Americans have had, that we will do the work we're supposed to do while we have the opportunity to do it. If we pursue the same politics that we pursued the last 10 years in Washington, for the next 10 years, I'm going to be part of the first generation of Americans to leave less opportunity, not more, to the people coming after us. We cannot allow that to happen, Iowa. We cannot allow that to happen, America. And I think, from my point of view, we certainly need to make Donald Trump a one-term president, but that's just a necessary step in the direction of where we need to head. We have got to figure out how to govern this country again. And we have to unify ourselves over the issues where there is vast agreement in America. I come from a state that's exactly a third Democratic, a third Republican, and a third independent. And I've learned something running for office in that state. You don't say one thing in a primary and something else in a general election. You don't say one thing in rural Iowa and something else in Des Moines. The people of this country need something better than that. And the other thing is, this isn't just about who's in the White House. That is important. I would like to be your president. I would like to be in the White House to help us lead this country back to the prosperity that we all deserve. But what it's really about is all of us taking control of this democracy again. This government was immobilized before Donald Trump showed up. There are a lot of people I know in Colorado that tell me they voted for Donald Trump because they wanted to blow the place up. And I say, well, congratulations, you achieved your objective. Now what are we going to do for our kids and our grandkids? What are we going to do for America's place in the world? And that comes down to all of us. It means we have to get the money out of our politics by overturning Citizens United and get the people back into our politics. It means that we have to end political gerrymandering in this country, as Iowa has done. It means we need a lifetime ban on members of Congress who have the privilege to be in the Senate or the House, a lifetime ban from ever becoming lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Half the people who leave the Congress and don't retire become lobbyists in Washington, D.C. What kind of signal does it send? So I want to close just by saying I have no doubt that we can do this. I'm optimistic about it. There's no reason to worry or to get up in the morning thinking, I can't believe the country's headed in the direction that it's headed. This is in your hands. The work that you do between now and Election Day will decide whether we're going to preserve this democracy, this experiment in self-government for another 230 years, or whether we're going to let it fail. And if we stand on the example that our parents and our grandparents set for us, people who disagreed with each other on all kinds of things, but still found a way to work together for the benefit of the next generation, we cannot fail. We will succeed. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Who would like to ask a question, bring a criticism? Yes.
This is the first time in 25 years that I've been to the Iowa State Fair without my dad. I would like to know what you're going to do to cope with that public safety.
Thank you. The question was, this is the first time I've been to the Iowa State Fair in 25 years without my father because of Alzheimer's. What are you going to do for that crisis? I lost my father this year as well, so I'm very sorry that you... I understand. And I believe we need to fully fund Alzheimer's research in this country. If we don't do that, we're going to end up bankrupting the country because we have to find a cure and a treatment. If we don't, the demographics and the changes to our healthcare system will overcome the United States. So thank you for your advocacy. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Speaking of 230 years, well, I thought what everybody's telling us is we're going to be gone in 12.
What? I didn't call on you, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, you were just expressing about what's going to happen 230 years from now. Well, the only word that I'm getting is this country is going to be gone in 10 years. So what is it? Oh, 12. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure I understand, but thank you. Yes, sir.
Why do you continue to support means testing programs for health care and public education when universal programs are stronger? Everyone here pays taxes, and I think they're entitled to health care through Medicare for all.
Thank you. I don't support means testing, but I appreciate your asking the question.
Public option is kind of a means.
No, it's not. No, a public option, thank you for the opportunity to explain it. Since we passed the Affordable Care Act 10 years ago, and I was there, I was one of the 60 votes that voted for that, and I was up for election in the swing state of Colorado. That's a tough way to win an election, voting for the Affordable Care Act. But I was asked on TV whether I was willing to lose my seat over it, and my answer was yes. And I went out to rural parts of my state to explain why I had voted for the Affordable Care Act and why we needed a public option to finish the job. 10 years later, we haven't passed a public option. I believe the fastest way to universal health care in this country is to give every family in America the opportunity to make a choice for their family, whether they want to stay on the private insurance they have or whether they'd like a public option administered by Medicare. I just believe it. And I know Bernie's coming up here after me, so, but I just don't believe that the American people are ready to take away insurance and the choice for insurance from 180 million Americans and charge the middle class in America $33 trillion in taxes. I don't believe it. And I'm so sick and tired of this country not having universal health care that we can't let Bernie's ideology stand in the way of our making progress. I give Bernie Sanders all the credit in the world. I respect him for his ideological commitments. I respect him because he tells the truth about what's in his plan, but I disagree that that's going to get us universal health care in America. Yes, sir.
Did you say you want to expand government or reduce the size of government?
The question is, would I want to expand government or reduce the size of government? Having been a school superintendent, which I mentioned earlier, I know that in many ways the government in the 21st century does not work as well as it needs to. And in many ways, it's still running as though we're living in the 19th century. So I believe we should have a much smarter government than we have today. And I don't have any commitment to it as it exists the way it is today. We need to drag it into the 21st century. But I want to tell you this. Mitch McConnell and Trump are growing government more than Barack Obama ever did. Ever did. The amount of debt that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have put on this government, have put on the next generation of Americans, is more than any other living politician. They have increased the rate of growth of the government more than Barack Obama did when he passed the Recovery Act. And next year, when unemployment is probably still going to be down, we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit thanks to Trump. It's crazy. For those of you that voted for the Republicans because they told you they were fiscally responsible, they are the biggest fiscal hypocrites that have ever walked the Capitol floor. Wait, sorry, I want to find a non-male person. Yeah.
First of all, we've seen a massive failure on the part of the Trump administration.
I'm sorry, somebody was yelling.
Okay. We've seen a massive failure on the part of the Trump administration to address the opioid crisis like he said he would. 70,000 people died last year of preventable overdoses, including a friend of mine. And there's legislation in the Senate right now. It's called the CARE Act. What it would do is offer funding over the course of 10 years to state and local organizations to address the opioid crisis by using harm reduction techniques versus criminalization, which we've seen in the past does not work. Right now, every other senator who's running for president is a co-sponsor of that bill. So I'm asking if you will add your name to that list and co-sponsor the CARE Act, because it is the best way that we're going to address the overdose crisis in this country.
I will add my name to that list, so thank you for asking. And I want to mention it because my friend Bernard's coming here right behind me, that he and I introduced a bill just several weeks ago that would create a $20 billion fund that would be created by fining the pharmaceutical companies that created this crisis to begin with and use that money to help support recovery in this country. We should have done it a long time ago. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes. How will you end political corruption in Washington? Folks, this battle is for all of us. It's not just for me. How will you end it? We all need to end it. The system is a corrupt system. The system has been bankrupted by a lousy Supreme Court decision called Citizens United. It has been corrupted by the political gerrymandering and by the special interests. The Freedom Caucus has told you a story about how the government is somehow separate from all of you, and that it's bankrupt and that you should turn away from it. And they've told that story for the last 20 years. It is not separate from you. It is your government, and it is screwed up. And the only way we're actually going to be able to govern ourselves again as Americans, I don't care what party you're in, is to clean up the corruption in Washington, D.C. We have to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment. I strongly support that.
Mass shootings that have occurred in this country, how are you planning to address the gun violence crisis?
The question was, thank you, and I should have repeated your opioid question. I apologize for not doing that. But I was saying yes, so. The question is, the mass shootings that we've been having, what is my plan to address that? Thank you for asking the question. I think enough is enough. Enough is enough is enough is enough. I come from a Western state, the state of Colorado. We are a Second Amendment state. The shooting at Columbine, which was one of the first school shootings in our country, happened in my state. My daughters, who are standing right there, have grown up in the shadow of Columbine, just like kids all across America have grown up with the fear that something could happen to them when they're at school, and the knowledge that for 20 years the Congress has done nothing to respond. Almost 20 years ago, in my western state, we passed the same background check law that is waiting for Mitch McConnell to allow it on the floor of the United States Senate. And every single year, there are about 2 or 3% of the people that want to buy guns in Colorado who don't get to buy guns because they're murderers and they're rapists and they're domestic abusers. And there's nobody that can tell me that our state would be safer if they had weapons. If we can do that in Colorado, we can do that in Washington. If we can limit the size of magazines, that guy in Dayton had 100 rounds in his magazine. Nobody needs a 100-round magazine in this country. And if we can do that in Colorado, we can do that in Washington. And you should call Mitch McConnell and tell him to put this bill on the floor of the Senate in September when we get back. And if you call him today, call him tomorrow, call him next week, and the week after that, and let him know that you're watching what he's doing with his debt and his inability to deal with gun violence and his inability to deal with health care or climate. Is there somebody? Yes, sir.
What is your plan to address the growing student debt crisis?
What is
your plan to address the growing student debt crisis?
We need to address the growing student debt crisis, I think, by making it easier for people to pay back their student loans, reduce the amount of money that you have to pay back every year. I want to say honestly, I do not support Bernie's plan to get rid of student debt in this country. I don't. You got to make choices. I would rather have free preschool in this country than free college in this country. That's my feeling. And you know what? You know what? You know why? You know why politicians don't talk about free preschool and do talk about free college? Because preschool kids can't vote. That's why. And we should be behaving. As Democrats and Republicans, as independents, as Americans, the way we should be behaving, the way we should be running our political system is based on how these preschool kids are looking at us. That's how we should evaluate our work, not whether we can have one more nonsense fight on the cable television at night, not whether we can have one more nonsense fight with our neighbor, but are we doing the work that this generation of preschool kids needs us to be doing for them? And on a whole host of issues, we're not doing it. The whole government is totally fiscally irresponsible, to go to your point. We're not dealing with the climate issue that has to be confronted. We have an economy that for 40 years hasn't allowed 90% of the American people to have a pay raise. And as I said earlier, an education system that's reinforcing that income inequality rather than liberating people from it. Doesn't it seem like we got enough work to do to knock off the political games and to do something different? That's what people in my state want. That's the people I've met in Iowa want. That's what people in New Hampshire and South Carolina say they want. And that's up to all of us. The politicians will not fix themselves. You need to fix Washington, D.C. Yes.
I'm a cancer survivor and a transplant recipient, and the court challenge to the ACA is very scary to me. I know that the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society have pushed our courts far to the right, and I'm curious what you could do to try to write that back so we have some balance in our judiciary. Are you open at all to expanding the Supreme Court or term limits on judges?
So the question is from a cancer survivor, very worried about what the courts are doing to the Affordable Care Act and what Trump administration is doing to the Affordable Care Act on pre-existing conditions. Worried about the courts changing it, and how do we change the courts? Am I open to changing the number of people on the Supreme Court? That's basically the question, I think.
Term limits.
Or term limits. If I'm open to anything, it's term limits, not changing the configuration of the Supreme Court. And I also am a cancer survivor. I got into this race late because I discovered that I had prostate cancer. And let me just say, this is my public service for the day. Anybody in this crowd that has a prostate and you know who you are, get it checked. And if you don't have a prostate, get something else checked. Because the only way I would have known was if I had gotten tested. I had no symptoms, and I'd be standing here with cancer if I hadn't been screened. We're the only country in the world where millions of people are having to contend with that. The only industrialized country in the world. My time is up. I will fight to make sure that, that we do everything we can to protect those pre-existing conditions. I apologize for using up all my time. Thank you for having me today. Wonderful to see you. Thanks.